Yo, 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 what's going on, guys? It's Buns, and welcome back to the Road to Gladiator. Tonight, let's talk WoW PvP. We're going to cover Legion Season 1 of World of Warcraft Arena PvP. Now, this season has been horrendous. Horrendous. For so many different reasons. It has probably been one of, if not the most inconsistent season throughout entire World of Warcraft, and also one of the shortest as well too, which is really strange for given that amount of time frame that we have, which was just announced recently. The end of the season is going to be stopping here on December 13th, which is very short, within the next 2 weeks. So for such a small time frame, it's really surprising to see how up and down this entire season has gone. It's not a surprise to me that it's happened with all the PvP template changes that have been implemented into the game, and Blizzard now feeling like they have their hands on the wheel to make a ton of changes, which I'll get into a little bit later in this video. They're getting their feet wet in the water, and it went really poorly. They went for that initial swim with no floaties on, and they're drowning, and now the community and themselves are dragging themselves back to the shoreline for a go-to. Now, the first point that I want to tackle tonight that really is the headliner for the first season of Legion was that Blizzard was consistently inconsistent. Now, what I mean by that is look at the beginning of the expansion, right? We came out in 7.0, and I would say that overall, people were thoroughly enjoying 7.0. There were definitely some things that were strong. There were some things that were overpowered, but I felt like the hot fixes that Blizzard put in place, they gave a good amount of time to happen, and they were on areas that needed to be nerfed. Assassination Rogue, for example, took some nerfs. Demonology Warlocks took some nerfs. Ret Paladin Sank got nerfed a little bit to stop the amount of CC they're able to take people out of. They're making good changes in the right direction, and I think for 7.0, I brought up the analogy earlier talking about how Blizzard was getting their feet wet in the water, and then it went really poorly. It's like Blizzard jumped into the water, and they really did a good job with 7.0. I think it was a very solid patch, and people were enjoying themselves. And then, after they made all of these great, small, subtle hotfixes to tune down certain classes that were strong, they really pulled the plug. And they popped the floaties, and they dropped 7.1. Now, what I mean by that is they made some changes that absolutely did not have to happen whatsoever and completely imbalanced the entire patch going forward. For example, they overbuffed Death Knights by a lot. They overbuffed Destruction Warlocks by a lot, giving them Chaos Bolt damage, Conflagrate on an instant route that's non-DRs. They just put too much power in places of classes where you knew immediately they were going to have to make tunebacks to that, and it just didn't make sense. Blizzard put changes in place that they pretty much knew that they were going to have to change and fix, right? So it's one of the big issues that I had, especially with going into 7.1, is I felt like that they made double changes. Whereas, like, let's say they'll nerf a class to make sure that it's not as strong as the other class in competition, but then at the same time, they would buff another class. So a great example of this would be Destruction Warlocks, where a lot of melees were taking nerfs in 7.0, and then they go and buff Destruction Warlocks Chaos Bolt damage, they go and buff Destruction Lock's ability to lock targets in place with Conflagrate route. They not only turned the tides for melee being dampened and put down in damage efficiency, but they also made casters really strong, and it was just changes that were obviously going to have to be tuned back. So I felt like that Blizzard has not been thinking through their changes very efficiently for PvP, and I think 7.1 was the epitome of that, because I feel like the hot fixes that they've had in 7.1, once again, slowly have been getting things back to pace, but it's taken a very long time to get back to that spot. Now, this goes back to talking about the whole PvP template system that they have in place now. Blizzard is in control. And I think that what a lot of people are thinking right now, including myself, is that Blizzard is actively making changes. There's no question about that. But it seems like they are extremely pressured by the fact that now they have this tool available to them, that they feel pressured to make changes. Now, I think that this is really bad for the game. I'm not surprised that we've come to this hurdle, though, at the same time, too, because it's a brand new toy. They feel like they can play with it, and they want to see what they can do with it, have a big impact. More often than not, usually letting the game and players play out for themselves will usually bring up changes organically, and that's what we were seeing at the end of 7.0. Little tunes here and there, 5 seconds to Sanctuary, a little bit of damage off of Assassination Rogues, a little bit of tune backs to how much pet health was available for Demonology Warlocks, and we got to the point where people were figuring out at the end of 7.0, okay, we know this class is strong, but we know how to approach it, and we know we have a game plan for it. 7.1 completely flipped that on its head, and is now the mess that we are in, where we're slowly trying to recover with hotfixes and patches, coming up with 7.1.5 just around the corner. Now, going off of this idea, what really has been the epitome of 7.1 and why has it been so poor? Why are people not enjoying themselves? I think it's for two reasons. One, CC is invaluable. Crowd control is horrible because you cannot do enough damage in crowd controlled comps. And on the turn side of that, pressure comps are doing extremely well. Anything with a Warlock in it, anything with a DK in it, anything with a Feral Druid in it, pressure classes that are going to put out a high amount of damage and don't necessarily bring a ton of CC to the table depending on what you pick, but just have that damage pressure all the time are extremely strong. Part of this is just the damage that these classes are doing, but the other part of this as well too is tied into the PvP trinkets and the options available with them as well too. So for example, with the talent available like Relentless and Adaptation, it allows for some very strong combos. Orc Relentless is very good. Relentless by itself is very good, reducing your CC by 25%, which they then tone back to 20 to help out with this. Adaptation is very strong as well too, especially if you're playing a human. You have multiple ways to get out of trinkets, multiple ways to get out of stuns. Very strong, efficient way to help maximize the time that you are not in CC, which encourages a very heavy pressure meta where the CC is invaluable. So from a mage perspective, right, if we go in and we're trying to get CC, adaptation procs on our first sheep, right, then that chain is already cut. So even if you followed it up with a second sheep, well, that's not going to do that much, and your window of opportunity is now only 4 seconds. You're going to have to cast a resheep after that if you really want to get third DRs, and the amount of damage you're going to be able to do in that is so small and mitigated with a lot of these a lot of these trinkets in place to help mitigate the time that you are in CC. And in turn, that has really made classes like Rogue, Mage, and Priests across the board very much suffer because the amount of damage that they can do in their already mitigated CC windows is very small. Very small. And especially, I think, with Rogues and Priests specifically. Well, Rogues were one of the classes that was really not looked over very well. Assassination Rogues pretty much brought damage to the table, and when they were stripped of their damage, they pretty much fell off of the ladder unless you were playing with a Mage, and you have to be partnered with pretty much a Druid at this point to see any sort of success. Now, not only that, but there have been classes that have been pretty much completely ignored, like Priests. Whether you're playing Discipline Priest or by God's means, if you are a Holy Priest, I feel horrible for you because the class design of Holy Priest is horrid. And they did nothing about it to try to fix it. Very little to try to fix Holy Priest. There were small changes that came in a hotfix that increased healing by like 8% on some spells. Very, very minimal. And it's not even the spell mechanics of Holy Priest that are bad itself. It's just what the class brings to the table. It's just like very poorly designed. They don't bring enough CC. They're not bringing enough throughput. So they're not a discipline priest, or they're not a restoration druid that's offering CC, and they're worse than output healers like Mistweavers and Paladins. So it's like, what do you bring to the table? Nothing, right? They're horrible. Disc Priests are in a similar spot too, and on top of Holy Priests as well too, both of those classes are pretty much the only healers this expansion that have no mobility. That was not addressed whatsoever as well too. So these are some things that I'm personally looking at in 7.1.5, which is coming around the corner, where they're saying, hey, our goal with this patch is to go in, look at talent options where people feel like they have invaluable talents, and we want to place them with better talents that make you feel like you have choices. And I think that there are a lot of examples where that really needs to happen. For example, for Elemental Shamans, you have Gust of Wind in your second row, and then you have Windrush Totem, and you have a heal percentage. The amount of damage you take in 2 minutes, you heal your partners for that much. Why would you ever not take Gust of Wind? Like, Gust of Wind almost feels like it should be baseline. The other two talents are horrible. You can't have that on a 2-minute cooldown. There's some really serious talents that they need to look into for multiple classes, multiple specs, reevaluate and give better options to the players, because there are just complete rows where it is a no-brainer whatsoever, and it almost feels like you should have the spell baseline at this point for how bad the options are. Priests are probably more so than any other class really the target of this, and they need to get some better options in their talent rows to help their efficiency go up and their mobility. Now, going off of this a little bit, I want to get back on track talking about pressure, right? So we have these CC classes where pretty much outside of, I would say, Windwalker Frostmage right now, which can do a lot of damage because of the Windwalker landing into a Glacial Spike with cooldowns, can do really big damage in bursts in small windows, but outside of that, there's really not that much high burst windows with CC. Most of the damaging comps and most of the 3v3 comps that we're seeing are pressure comps, like Warlock Feral, Warlock anything, pretty much. Feral anything. You throw in a DK with anything, you're going to have high amounts of damage, which I was touching on earlier. And because of the PvP trinkets being in place as well too, that are mitigating how much time you're spending in CC, it encourages people to play classes like this that are overtuned in damage because the CC is invaluable. So even if you imagine yourself getting against a Warlock right now, for example, and being a caster that's not a Warlock, right? You're dealing with a caster that not only can slow your cast down, not only can put up instantaneous dot damage on you that's going to rot down your entire team without them having to cast once, they also have 2 spell locks to stop you from casting in the game. Boys, this is just way too overtuned. Warlocks are way too overtuned right now, and it pretty much makes it obsolete to be playing any other caster but Warlock if you're seriously trying to get anywhere in rating in PvP. It just is what it is. Now, on top of that, and once again, like I said, this is the first expansion that World of Warcraft has had the PvP template place to be able to make these changes, so this is their first go at it. I think it's gone pretty poorly, but we are making adjustments. Blizzard's making some adjustments coming into 7.1.5 to address talents. They're getting back on track with their hotfixes in 7.1 to get things back to speed. But another issue that's not just PvP related, but is completely game related, which I touched on a video a couple of weeks ago talking about the artifact knowledge system, has also really hurt the PvP scene, right? And especially across the board of World of Warcraft, but especially the PvP scene, right? Because we've been seeing so many inconsistent, frequent changes from World of Warcraft that people are not guaranteed that their spec and class is going to do well, and by having a system in place that does not encourage players the ability to be able to swap classes and try out different things when the meta shifts, it leaves people in a spot. For example, let's say assassination rogues. If someone put all of their talents and points and time and effort into an assassination rogue and it got completely trashed after 7.0, why would you ever want to play PvP? Because you're not even going to be able to catch up to speed with all the other players that already have their artifact level high, right? So you pretty much had to get lucky with the changes that happened from Blizzard's end and the PvP side of things when they were making adjustments to the PvP templates, and get lucky with which class you chose, right? And I mean, it's not a surprise to see like classes like Warlock, Shaman doing well, Feral Druids doing well, because those are usually consistently good. But it is really a huge bummer, I think, for people that are playing classes that are outside of that, because there were a lot of changes, even in specific classes, just having specific specs get completely flopped on their head. Like Demonology Warlocks, for example, got completely flopped on their head. They're pretty much useless now. So I think that it is an active change by Blizzard realizing this going into 7.1.5, realizing, you know what, we screwed up on this and we want to be able to help people get back to that by giving them the ability to get instant artifact knowledge up to level 15 and help players catch up their alt tunes, help players catch up their alternate specs, because this, in combination with the inconsistent frequent changes in PvP hotfixes, is really a bad taste in people's mouth and does not encourage fun in the game or people to want to continue playing, because they feel like that they can't play and the time and effort they've put into their tune is not valuable for their experience in enjoying the game, and it's out of their control at that point. It really is. I mean, the hotfixes and changes that come are out of their control, and the fact that they have to catch up and not be on par with everyone else that is sitting on a class that does well, it hurts. It sucks. And making that change really takes a lot of time and effort even to make that second tune, which you know is always going to be behind. So, some takeaways, right? Blizzard is actively trying to get involved, which I do think overall is a positive. The catch-22 here and the caveat is that Blizzard is pressured by their own PvP template system to make these changes. They're pressured by the community feeling like every single time that a class is doing poorly or a class is doing well that they have to change it. Blizzard needs to think for themselves, surround themselves with people that can help them make these changes, whether it's talking with their devs, whether it's talking to people in the PvP community, whether it's reaching out. and actively watching streams or paying attention to what's going on in high-end PvP. The fact, for example, that Destruction Warlock's Chaos Bolt got buffed by 15% when the top comp on the ladder was already Mistweaver Monk, Destruction Warlock, Windwalker Monk, it's just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Like, some of these changes that are happening just don't make sense. Once again, consistently inconsistent. And I feel like that Blizzard dug themselves a trench that now they're slowly trying to fill the grave. They're trying to get back afloat. They're trying to figure this out. And I think we're going in the right direction, but we have to see consistent changes where Blizzard gives enough time for the community to organically play through the patches that they're giving us and make changes accordingly, rather than feeling like we have to shove changes just to show people, hey, we're doing something, because what you're doing half the time is not going well, okay? 7.0 is a great example to look at what was going well. Small changes in the right direction, looking at abilities that were a little bit overtuned and finding ways to chunk them down just a little bit to get it onto place with other classes. Now, and I think as a side note as well too, something I want to bring up is we need to also pay attention to classes that are underperforming, right? Like, it took a very long time for people to be like, oh yeah, Fury Warriors are underperforming. Oh yeah, priests across the board are underperforming. We need to recognize this sooner and help make changes to what we can do to help make them better, whether it's utility, whether it's throughput. You need to be able to recognize this sooner, and I think that it is accomplishable. I think that that's something that is reasonable in the game. Continue making good hot fixes that the community can organically work through, and the changes are welcomed when they arrive, right? We don't have to shove them out. Now, going off of this as well too, we need to see what's going to happen with patch 7.1.5, because as I had said before, their goal with patch 7.1.5 is to make talent options feel more relevant and you have other choices, and rather than feeling like, oh, hey, I only have one option in this row, that's their goal. They want to open up and make it feel like you have more options. Not only are they creating new talents, they're getting rid of old talents, they're moving things around. There's a lot happening, and I think that on the player base side of it, be ready to expect, there's going to be a lot on the table, and there's probably going to be some spells that are really strong. But here's what happens. When we get a big patch like this, give it enough time to play out, right? The big catch is, unless there's a massive outlier, like something like Restoration Druid Thorns that came up, where you put it on a target and if you smacked into them, someone would evaporate in 2 seconds, right? That was immediately changed when it happened. That's a good change to immediately change, obviously. But for spells that may seem strong right off the beginning of 7.1.5, let them sit for a while and let's figure out, why are they strong? Why are they doing well? Are they doing well against certain classes and specs? Are they doing well against certain styles of comps? Before we go in and we make these changes that are forced and are premature, right? We need to let the game and community organically figure them out to make changes that are going to be good for the longevity of next season. Now, I'm optimistic about the next season. I like the way that they've been going with their hot fixes, and I think that if they continue going in a gradual pace at addressing making changes in the PvP side of World of Warcraft, we can accomplish that and get to a much better place. Really, the big flop on the head for the most part was 7.0 to 7.1, where everything was just pretty much dunked on its head, right? We need to make subtle changes, and sometimes that can come as a nerf to a class that's overperforming or a buff to a class that is underperforming. But when we usually have two of both, or one of both, excuse me, when you have the nerf to an overpowered class and a buff to an underpowered class, that's what happened in 7.1. That's what happened in 7.1, and that's why you saw classes like Destruction Warlocks get extremely strong overnight. Frosty Case get extremely strong overnight, and it's not a surprise, right? If we make that double entendre where both things get flopped, obviously that's going to happen, and making small gradual changes through the hot fixes and through the 7.1.5, I think will help get us on the right track for the next season. As a final note, I think that the first season of Legion was not a success, and I think went very poorly, but the asterisk and the great thing about the season is I think that there was a lot to learn from it, right? Because we started out at a great place, and then we dumped ourselves way down by making premature, forced changes that were not thought through, and were immediately fixed and immediately reverted. So continue making consistent changes and letting the community have enough time on their hands to work through them. We should probably readdress what's going on with the trinket system in World of Warcraft because it favors pressure on teams that are running as rot comps rather than CC burst comps. And if we're going to keep the trinket system in place, which I am actually a fan of, I do like, then we need to look at classes and compositions that are going to be playing burst in PvP and give them more damage to realize through their inefficient windows with going up against talents like Relentless and Adaptation to help them feel like they can get their pressure out and be more bursty and efficient. That's it for this video, guys. I wanted to talk about this. We got 2 weeks still at the end of the season, but I wanted to get it out a little bit early as kind of a wrap up for what you can expect about this season and my goals going into the next season and where I think Blizzard will be heading. I am optimistic about patch 7.1.5. Very happy that they're introducing the artifact knowledge catch-up system, so that way I'll be able to play multiple tunes. I'm already leveling up my warrior. I'm going to be leveling up a druid as well too. Multiple tunes I think is good for the game, especially when they've tuned back the amount of abilities that you have in PvP. It's nice to be able to multi-class, try out different specs, try out different roles. I think that's great for the game in PvP, and it helps people catch up and feel like they have more options to play. I'm out, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. As always, I will see you guys on the live stream during the afternoon or on the next video. Peace. Keep it easy, everyone. Yo, yo, yo. What's going on, guys? It's Buns, and welcome back to the Road to Gladiator. Today, I found out about this awesome talent playing my LA Shaman in 3v3 arenas. I'm going to let you guys in on a secret on something that's extremely OP